what I want you to do here, you're going to leave your API server running. And for now, I'm going to shut off Webpack. And I'm going to change that to be yarn watch, because we still need to compile our Webpack code. But we're not going to be reading from the dev server anymore. We're going to be requesting it from our API server, or not our API server, but our Express server that we just wrote. And now we're going to do node-env equals server node server.js. So now it says listening on 8080. So if I come on to here and refresh 8080 on here, notice we're still getting our website and everything's kind of fine. I don't think we're going to get any console errors. Oh, we screwed up hot reload. I will show you how to fix hot reload with this. But that's why I was saying, hey, I'm trying to find hot reload. That's because we're not talking to the dev server anymore. We're talking to the node server that we wrote, right? But now what's more interesting about this is what it was before, right? Totally empty. If I refresh, look at how much stuff now is coming down, right? This is a fully rendered experience, which is pretty cool, right? Now, something I want to show you that's perhaps even more impressive about this. Oops. So I'm going to come in here, and I'm going to click right there. I forgot how to do this with Chrome DevTools. Settings. I am going to disable JavaScript. Wherever disable JavaScript is.
You passed it. It was on the right under debug.
Disable JavaScript, right? So now, as long as the DevTools are open, JavaScript is going to be disabled. So now if I refresh the page, oh, you know what's going on here? It's styled components doesn't work without JavaScript. That's a problem. So that's something you accept when you take on styled components. But notice that everything is still actually being rendered out okay. I can actually click onto like Game of Thrones and it's going to take me into the page. I can go back. I can click S-Video. So I'm actually able to, besides the styled component stuff, I'm able to still navigate my site, right? Because what's happening, if you look at my server here, it's just routing to each one of these. It's making a full server request, right? The server's server-side rendering that code and then just sending it back down to you, right? So we made our page work without JavaScript. Really anymore, that's not really much of a problem. Almost every client that's going to be accessing your page is going to have JavaScript enabled. But let's say you have like a JavaScript error, right? You're still going to be able to work, right? It's kind of this progressive enhancement idea. That's typically a pretty good idea, I would say, right? So I think that's really cool. That's because it is really cool. If you weren't using styled components, that would be a little bit more impressive, but I digress. Any questions about server-side rendering?
So the idea is just the first page that the client loads is pre-rendered, and once React takes over, it goes back to its old single-page application
Exactly.
behavior. Okay.
So what this is going to buy for you, one, it's going to buy you a lot with Google, right? Because you're going to send that markup faster, which Google is then going to rank higher, and it's going to be more controllable in the sense that, yes, the Google crawler does run JavaScript, but it's imperfect for sure. If you send it predetermined markup, you get to control what Google's crawling over, right? So it's a big SEO win for sure. It's a big win for perceived web performance, right? If you're on a 2G connection, in the middle of nowhere, or just, maybe you're stuck on crappy Wi-Fi or something like that, this is going to load a whole lot faster. And there's just tons and tons and tons of data out there that says if you load faster, users will give you more money, right? In some capacity. Whether that's more page clicks to get more ad revenue or your funnels faster on your e-commerce website, all of that, right? So this is a win. If you can server-side render, I recommend it. Other questions?
And this is to get you ready to put your site onto production?
Mm-hmm. So typically you're going to do the server-side rendering. I would say it doesn't always have to be just for production, but yeah, you definitely want to be doing it in production. What I would do in this particular case, oh my god, look at that. That's the hot module reload just losing its mind. I would do like the Webpack dev server for like local development, because that's a really nice developer experience, and you don't care if it's server-side rendering or not. And then when I send it off to production, I'll let server-side rendering happen just in production.
And you said hopefully when you click on the button, React has loaded. What happens if React hasn't loaded yet?
So what I just showed you here, our site works without JavaScript, right? Because that's actually a real link. It's an A tag that goes to that. So it's going to hit your server again, make a full request, and come back. So in that particular case, everything's going to work. However, if like it's something that's like pops up a modal or something like that, it's just not going to work, right? Nothing's going to happen. However,
what about our dispatch
for sure.
events?
Yeah, so what'll happen then, if I'm able to type in there before React and Redux have bootstrapped, it's going to blow it away, right? Because it's going to bootstrap and say, my state is actually empty string. However, that's usually not a problem. We're talking like, you're going to load that first payload, and then within 100 milliseconds, you're going to get the JS. And once the JS is down, that parsing and bootstrapping is going to be 5 to 50 milliseconds at most. Users don't make decisions that fast, right? You would have to be like prepared with like your fast switch modules, like, okay, now click it, right? Even on a slow connection, right? In other words, it's not something I find myself concerned a lot with. I mean, definitely instrument it, right? Like, if that is something you're worried about, but it has yet to be a problem for me.
It is good to keep in mind, especially on like a site like this, where downloading the JavaScript will contend with all of the posters,
Mm-hmm.
right? If you have large images or something, and you can only download so many of those in parallel, and yeah.
Most definitely. I mean, this is loading large posters, right? Because I'm super lazy and I didn't want to downscale them. But you definitely should worry about things like that, like compressing your images, making sure that like you have like thumbnails for like the right pages and full size for the other ones, for sure. Yeah, Mark.
If you make API calls to Node, how do you mix in server-side rendering?
So this is, you're getting into the questions about hydration and things like that. So for example, if I click on here, ideally when I was server-side rendering, I would not come down and make a request, right? Did I shut this down? I did. Node env equals, I guess I have it on here, don't I? Ideally, I would come to here and I wouldn't be making this request, right? I would already have that loaded because I loaded it from the server, right? This is a really touchy situation to get this correct, right? So a big key about server-side rendering, which I actually should address, is if you come in here and we're going to zoom in and we're going to look for this thing right here, data react checksum. So this is basically your app gets run through this hashing algorithm. They generate a hash. Then when you get down to the client, it's going to render for the first time, run the hashing algorithm again, and make sure that those hashes match so that you're generating the same markup on the server as you are on the client. If those mismatch, in fact, I'll show you how we'll just make it mismatch really quick. If I put, I don't know, like here, I'm just going to put an H1 that's going to render out math.random. So this will be different on the client, right? Because every time you run math.random, it's going to give you a different output. So it'll be different on the client than it is on the server. So if I load this again, it's going to say, what the hell are you doing? So right there is what I'm talking about. It says, hey, React tried to reuse the markup that you sent down there, but like, hey, you messed up, right? Like what I got on the client is different than what I got on the server. I'm going to blow everything away. So all of those performance benefits are actually now worse, right? Because you had to pay all the extra cost to get all that server-side rendering done. It's going to say, you messed up. I'm just going to blow it away and then restart. So that's something you definitely have to be careful about. So getting to the hydration side of things, getting it to have that, the ability to have API requests before they're made is tough, right? Because when you first create your app, you're doing it with the thought in mind that it's going to request it from the API. So with Redux, it's actually not too bad. You just have to make sure that you're providing the same initial state. So you have to have a kind of a variable initial state based on if the context is available or not. But the problem with that is you have to make sure the context is both available on the server and on the client. Plus, it can still do it if you navigate to that page without that being hydrated, right? So what I'm trying to paint a picture of here is it's a bit of a complicated mess to kind of preempt those API requests. And you have to kind of weigh your answers of like, is this worth it to me to try and do? It's possible, for sure, but it's tough. And we're actually going to deal with this problem even more in depth here in just a second because we're going to do code splitting, which like compounds this problem. Other questions? Stop that.